5,800 cubic foot, 4-compartment, covered hopper car. Oh, let's get the date it was built. Built in 1987. Westlake Polymers, 58145. Former ET or C or ETL. I think ETLX. We'll look and see. Eastman. So whatever Eastman's reporting marks were before they sold it to Westlake. ETCX was the original reporting marks, 58145. Cast brake diagram, ACF pattern. Yeah, it's the ACF center flow. This is a repaint. It was repainted in 2002. Apparently they rechecked the weight at that time too, or made some repairs to the car that would have changed the weight, so had to reweigh it. So built in 87, 97, 07, 17, so a 35-year-old rail car. Set next to the newest rail car on the line here. Built in May of 2022. Now, this was built by Greenbrier Paragould, formerly ARI Paragould. ARI is the successor to ACF. So basically, in fact, they got the same center flow trademark. Now belongs to Greenbrier, that once belonged to ACF. So built 35 years apart, but with a lot of the same planning around the geometry of the cars. So that car is only 5,800 cubic feet. This one is 6,260 cubic feet. So I would imagine this car, and it doesn't have brake pipe length, so I don't have any kind of way to estimate the length of the car. But I would imagine that this car here is the new car is probably, 4 feet longer or so than the older car. Still has the ACF style valve. In fact, that is one thing that's odd about that car. Do they have the... Let's see which kind of ACF valves they got on that car. Okay, they do have the what I call the OG valves. Before they made the types of handles that's on that newer car that curve down, that's a little bit easier to pull up and down, they had those little T-shaped handles. So this type of car, and that goes for the newer one and this one, you have a valve for the far side of the car and the near side of the car. So when you hook your suction up to this pipe on the side of the car, you have a lot of control over the flow of your material. You can even see on that little sign, it says handle on this side, open the far side, and then you see the handle on this side, it says open near side. Generally, I would open the far side first because that gives you the most control, because if you did have a little bit of a leak through the valve, losing some air on the near side, you make it hard to clean out the far side. So if you empty the far side first, then open and close the far side, get it cleaned out real good, and then clear out the near side, you're more likely to get a greater percentage of the material out of the car. You can get these down to where there's very little, if any, pellets left in the car at all. I mean, if you're dedicated about it, you ain't gonna leave anything behind, so that's gonna be worth it for anybody else to try to clean out the car just for the remainder of the pellets. As I said, this was originally Eastman had a business where they made plastic pellets at one time, and they sold that off at one time to Westlake. You can kind of see in the glare of the sun a little bit better that ETCX shining through under that WLPX just by the shadow of the angle the light's hitting it. At least it is to me. I don't know if it shows good on the video. And also, that's a good side-by-side, some of the differences. On here, on this car, you got a lot of the parts that are listed for the car stenciled onto the car, so if they needed to change some springs or wheels or anything, they know what size parts to get. Well, they didn't do that on this newer car. They figure instead of putting a coating on there, some print that's going to wear off in a couple of years, they put this sticker on here, and I hope they have some very durable sticker technology. But to be fair, for a number of years now, they've used these brake diagrams on that stainless or aluminum or whatever it is, and those do hold up very well. But this is the older technology. Before they had that stainless or aluminum or whatever they put them on, they used to do cast brake diagrams. So this holds up incredibly well, as you might imagine, because you can always sand it off and repaint it if it does get too rusty to read. That's a nice big one. You can see this car a little bit different than a lot of cars. On the end, it doesn't have a plate across it. And I think that was an experiment to see if they could take any weight off the cars or make them more, efficiently using less materials. But it looks to me, whenever I see these cars, like they had to beef up the supports, because losing that plate across there took some of the stiffness away from the end of this car. So I think it ended up probably being a bit of a wash, so you don't see a whole lot of these cars. It's like it was something they experimented with and decided that's not really going to pan out to save any money. I got to imagine there's a lot more work to having those extra welds to. I mean, they can weld anything, sure, at a professional place building rail cars like that, but if you're not getting much benefit from it, why have extra welds? You're just making more work than is necessary and cutting into any savings you get from saving on materials. That probably would have been built in Huntington, West Virginia. American Car Foundry built many thousands of covered hopper cars there over the years. When they sold the business, or really ARI sort of owned ACF anyway, I think. So, or at some point they bought them, I don't know. But once they transferred, let's put it, say, the business from Huntington to Paragould, it went from being union built to non-union labor. So that's probably one of the biggest differences between ACF built and ARI built. Built in May of 22. This coupler was cast in March 22. Now, couplers tend to get replaced after several years, so I don't think that this, wow, one of 87. This is the original coupler. I did not expect that. Now I gotta check the coupler out on the other end. It's gotta have had at least one of the couplers replaced in 35 years. Wow, another 1987 coupler. You can see on this end, you don't have all the piping and stuff. You only have to have the brake piping on one end of the car. That'd be the B end. The B end has the brakes. You have 4 compartments. Take a look. This 1,590 cubic foot compartment is lettered as compartment A. And this would be AC or CA for A center or center A. They call it center A on this one. Then center B, CB, and then B for the brake end. I have just seen a handful of cars in my career that were mislabeled, where the brake end was labeled as the A end. It doesn't happen very often at all. They're pretty consistent about making the B end the brake end on these 4 compartment cover hopper cars. They've really cut down on this newer car with the amount of stenciling they have to do. And some of the stenciling they do have to do, they've done with smaller letters. Like in the past, where they put what type of lining was applied as a paint coating on the inside of the car, rubberized paint that the pellets bounce off of when they're loading these plastic pellet cars. They've made this just a smaller print rather than big letters you can read from, 20 or 30 feet away from the side of the track. Because who needs to read it from 20 or 30 feet away from the side of the track? It's not something everybody going by needs to know. Now on the repaints, a lot of times you'll see it in smaller print than on the original paint. But this one, they're going even with the original paint, using the smaller letters for the lining paint. And there's no mention on this of what type of paint they used on the exterior, which is unusual. I've seen it on some other cars too, but it is more common if you're going to, when they go ahead and they list that lining paint, they usually list the exterior paint too. Let's take a look on this repaint. Interior lining, Amercoat 428 PC, and that was done in 2020, so even more recently than the exterior paint. The exterior paint actually isn't a small print. Like I said, a lot of these repaints, they'll put that in fairly small print. Sigma paint, and with its 2 numbers like that, one of them's the primer, usually the first number, and then the second number be your top coat. Coupled length, 64 feet, 6.5 inches. That's not something I necessarily remember seeing on a lot of cars. It may be on there, but it's not jumping out to me as something I normally remember seeing. Well, that's it for today. A little comparison of a couple cars built in a similar style by one factory and its successor factory. The Huntington, West Virginia car on the end, and the Paragould, Alabama car here right next to it. 35 years apart, but now parked side by side.